is that the heart isn't just a pump, that the heart actually plays an enormous role in influencing our choices and our behaviors. So when I had the epiphany that I was affecting the hearts of people, I actually was. And so when I say lead from the heart, which is the title of the book, it's not a metaphor. I'm saying do the things that are going to affect people emotionally because that's what truly drives us.
Hello and welcome to the New England Lean podcast. I'm Paul Critchley, president of New England Lean Consulting, and I'll be your host. This week, our guest is Mark C. Crowley. Now, if you've taken any of our seminars or workshops on employee engagement or organizational culture and leadership, you'll likely recognize his name as I often recommend both his book and his podcast. His book title is Lead from the Heart: Transformational Leadership for the 21st Century. And it's something I've read, I reread, I love it. And again, I recommend his podcast. It's by the same name, Lead from the Heart. So if you're into kind of the same things we talked about on this podcast, you'll definitely love Mark's. Mark's somebody that I really look up to, and I was so happy that he agreed to be on our episode and talk about what he's gone through and where he's taken his career. I really like Mark's messaging. He was in industry for 20 years in the dog-eat-dog world of financial services, and he rose up through the ranks pretty high. He was at national level positions at one of America's largest financial institutions, and he was actually named Leader of the Year once there. But Mark's approach is so different, and that's really what has drawn me to him. He's very untraditional, and he's proven that by deeply caring and supporting people, you can positively affect employees' hearts, and the remarkable effect on driving sustained engagement and loyalty and productivity and all the good things that come with that approach. In this episode, Mark and I, we talk about those things, and we also both share some personal stories of some hardships that we both had to overcome, and how those have influenced how we teach what we do about engagement and organizational leadership. So I hope that you like it. As always, always looking for feedback. So please like and subscribe if you do, and hit us up and let us know if there's other topics that you'd like to hear or people you'd like to hear from, and we'll work our best to get them on the show. But that's enough from me. On with the show, and I hope you like it. All right, welcome to the New England Lean podcast. I'm your host, Paul Critchley. Today we are joined by, Mark, I'm going to try not to fanboy all over you, but Mark C. Crowley is our guest today. Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Paul?
I'm good. So inquiring minds want to know, is that your Zoom shirt?
That's very funny. I did dress up for you a little bit today, to be honest with you, but I'm also that guy that, I can't come out to work in my pajamas. I have the formality of showering and dressing, and, it just feels like going to work for me. So I haven't been wearing this shirt for a while, so I put it on for you.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. But so it is funny because I saw you. So you tweet a lot, which was awesome. Because and I'm always amazed at how much content you can share that quickly. But you had a funny tweet the other day about Zoom shirts. This is why I wanted to bring that one up, because I forget what the statistic was, but it was something like 60% of people have one.
A high percentage of people that, men and women that, right, put on a specific shirt just so that they look good, from the waist up on a Zoom call. I think That's pretty funny.
It is.
What are you wearing at home that you have a Zoom shirt? You know what I mean?
Right. So I have your book. So for anybody who's taken a workshop with me, you guys all know I talk about this book and Mark's podcast like ad nauseum. So Mark, I do have your book, and I want to get into that. But for those who maybe haven't, don't follow me as much or see the content that I share, can you just tell us kind of who you are, and walk us through your background a little bit?
It's such a big question. I think the essence of who I am is I am a former executive. I spent, over 20 years in financial services in some very big jobs. And I think through the course of my life, I was being prepared. So I'll stop here and say that I believe that I was put on the planet to do the work that I'm doing today. So the sequence of my upbringing all the way through my career let me get to an understanding of leadership that I think is rarely developed unless you have my life experience. And because of that, it allowed me to then proceed into thinking, I'm going to write this book. But what you may not know is that the book that I ended up writing isn't the book I intended to write. There are actually two different sections of it. And the first half I never intended to write. But somebody, a close friend of mine, knew I was writing a book and knew that I had these leadership practices that I knew in relationship to the people that I was working with were very uncommon. And they weren't just uncommon in terms of practice, they were uncommon in terms of what they generated in terms of engagement and loyalty and productivity. And so I knew I was managing from an outlier standpoint. And that's what I wanted to talk about. Do these things and you're going to get incredible productivity out of people. And this friend of mine said, you're going to have to explain why this works, right? You just can't go out there and have people just take you at your word. And I was like, oh shit, like I never even thought of that. I was like 10 months into this process and it never even crossed my mind. So sitting exactly where I am, looking out my window here, I was like, okay, so what was I doing that inspired people to scale mountains for me? And it hit me one day that I have been affecting the hearts in people, and that motivated people on an instinctive level to just do extraordinary things for me, want to work for me in the beginning, just like I want to work for that guy. And so I'm attracting great talent and then doing unbelievable things, setting records and doing work that nobody else was doing, achieving goals that no one else was achieving, all of that. And I went and I told my wife, I wasted almost a year of my life because I figured out something that everybody's going to think is a complete joke, which is you don't bring the heart into leadership. Mm-hmm. And so I got really depressed. And like a day later, my wife said to me, you already know this works. Like, so what's the big deal? Why don't you just go look for evidence to support it? You already know that it's got to be something out there. And it was like, dust yourself off, pick yourself up and get out there and write this book. And I realized that she was right. So I spent about 18 months looking for information. And the key piece of information, this is really the answer to your question, is that the heart isn't just a pump, that the heart actually plays an enormous role in influencing our choices and our behaviors. So when I had the epiphany that I was affecting the hearts in people, I actually was. And so when I say lead from the heart, which is the title of the book, it's not a metaphor. I'm saying do the things that are going to affect people emotionally, because that's what truly drives us. We think we're rational beings and we're not rational beings after all. So what I'm trying to do is to fundamentally change how we think about leadership, and not just think about it, but how we actually lead. And so that's effectively my mission. And so that's what brought me here today.
We were chatting before we started, and I'm very appreciative. So please tell your wife thank you for giving you that nudge, and your friend, because when I read your book, you hooked me after like the third paragraph of the introduction. And the reason I think that is, and what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is, you talked about your life experiences, and specifically kind of how you grew up. So you and I grew up very similarly, by the way, which I hadn't mentioned to you. And I say similarly, not exactly, but I think close enough. And that's why I think your work speaks to me. And I wonder what your thoughts are as far as, do you think that's why this is such an outlier concept? Because you have that background. Do you want to maybe put a stake in the ground a little bit and kind of give people a feel for, where you're coming from?
So I think what you're asking, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. For some reason, it just started reverberating on my end. I wanted to make sure. So I think the big picture here is that I had I don't know, a perverse upbringing. Let's just say that. My mom died when I was very young, came home from school, found out that she had died. She had cancer. Nobody told me she had cancer. I knew she was sick, but it was beyond my scope to think that she was going to die from it. And turned out my father was having an affair with a woman. He ended up marrying her. And between the two of them, they were the most mean spirited, psychologically and emotionally abusive people. And they effectively really, specifically my father, his instincts were to really, truly just diminish me, to, reinforce that I will never amount to anything, that I fundamentally lacked as a human being. And to hear that for your whole childhood, really takes an edge off of you. It takes your self-confidence and your belief and your courage to try new things. And then for reasons I still don't really fully understand, my dad was actually a very successful guy. He was a senior executive vice president, General Electric. By the time I was born, he was already a wealthy guy. And so he could have put me through college and told me that he would, even though he said I would never amount to anything. I think he thought I was going to go to college. Bit of a paradox, right? So a couple of days after high school, he kicked me out of the house. No money, no, hey, we're going to go find you a nice place to live. Hey, I'm still going to pay your tuition. Hey, still want you to come over for dinner on Sunday nights. We're still your parents. It was over, like literally over. And in an instant, like he told me you need to go out. And 3 days later, I was living in a really shitty apartment and starting college. And it was a very, very difficult experience, as you can imagine. I had no money, I had no job, I had a part-time job. So I had to kind of figure that out. I don't know how I made it through really, truly the first couple of years of college, but then I sort of got into a rhythm. You were talking about how you mow your lawn earlier. I got into a rhythm and I ended up doing very well at work and very well at school. And so when I got out of college, I realized that I had lacked so much in terms of positive reinforcement and encouragement and love and just, and safety. Like I was always feeling really vulnerable. And so when I started managing people, I gave that to people. And without really any conscious thinking, I think what I realized in my 40s was that what I had done all along was to give people what I always wanted and believed. If I had been given those things in my own upbringing, I could have been infinitely more successful than I was at the time, right? And so to do that unconsciously, I was in my 40s when somebody who had worked for me for nearly 20 years said, "You realize you manage people really differently, don't you?" And I had sort of an inkling. I didn't really have it fleshed out. And I said, "What do you mean?" She started giving me examples. And then all of a sudden I had the epiphany, oh my God, like this shaped who I was. This shaped how I've led. So you had to have what I call the shitty upbringing, in order to lead this way, because it changed me. If I had grown up as a spoiled kid, growing up where I grew up, the country club and all that kind of stuff, and lived that life out, I wouldn't have empathy for people. And I really wouldn't be able to feel into what they need, which is what I think my gift is. I can sense what people need and I can give it to them in real time. And it has this profound impact on them. Like, I want to do something for this guy because I just love what he did for me. And that's kind of the connection. Right. So the childhood experience, really has shaped who I would become, and even more than, most people, I think.
And again, it's, I can relate. And that's, again, probably why I think it when I read your book, I listened to your podcast, I'm like, yes, yes, that's what so, with the way you present things and the way you're, question your guests, it answers a lot of questions for me. And I know it probably answers a lot of questions for a lot of people, because, we're all shaped by how we were raised. And, so I'm in my 40s, and I've probably led, like, when I was in industry, I didn't make it as far up as you. I was never a VP or a director, but I don't know, if I had to guess, I probably had 300 or 400 people report to me over the, all my jobs and careers. But I've kind of gotten some feedback like that too, but I could never really put my finger on it as to why is that different? So I guess my next question is, so understanding that's kind of how you, like, where you came from and kind of how it led to where you got, why why don't you think more people like get it? Why do you think this isn't like why aren't more people reading this book and saying, yeah, like that makes perfect sense, I got to do it that way?
This is going to sound like a real silly example, but I've used it before and it resonates with me, so I'm just going to throw it out there. Let's say you work in a pizza restaurant and you've been working at a pizza restaurant for a really long time. And you're the guy now that they can throw the dough up in the sky and, twirl the pizzas around and form the crust, without looking. I mean, you've got it perfected, right? So then the owner comes in one day and says, hey, we think fried chicken has a much better potential than pizza. So we'll probably do still some pizzas, but most of the time we're going to do chicken. Well, what does that do to you? Well, it makes you feel like, well, wait a minute. I was really good at pizza and people knew that I was really good at pizza and they saw the skill that I had cultivated and I'd invested. And by the way, I'm successful at pizza. So like now I'm threatened by this new thing here, right? What happens if I don't make it successfully in chicken? What if I don't do it as well? And am I going to lose my job? And so that's sort of the loose thing that I think is playing into this, which is that you have to change. You have to evolve how you think about managing people. And we have this, this traditional leadership theory says pay people as little as possible, squeeze as much out of them as possible. I'm on top of you. I get to order you around, kind of a thing. And whether people go, well, that's not true. But, every one of us can name an organization that manages exactly like that. So it's very much true. And even if you think, well, I don't lead like that, ask your people and they're going to go, well, you kind of do, it kind of plays into. So you say, well, now we have to manage in a different way. I just think it pushes people and makes them uncomfortable, even if they get it. But the other is that you've got a lot of pressure from the organization. So when I was leading people, I was very successful early on. So people kind of labeled me as a talented manager and talented leader. But no one ever looked under the hood. No one ever looked and said, what's he doing that's getting these results? They just, they figured I was doing what everybody else was and I was lucky or whatever. Even when my book came out, the people that I used to work with were like, what happened to him? They're like, you have a spiritual transformation, leading from the heart. It's like, what? I'm not kidding. That was the reaction to it. Like, is he a religious person now? We haven't seen him for a couple of years and this is what he comes up with. Very few people, the people that worked for me knew it, understood it. They were like, yeah, that's what he's been doing. And that's what I reacted to. But people outside didn't understand it and thought maybe there's something like, something happened to him in a bad way. They think they really kind of didn't take it seriously. And so I think it's this word heart. It's just a catalyst for, you can just quickly dismiss it. That's soft, that's weak. Immediately start treating people well, they're not going to perform for you. They're going to get soft around the middle. And what they don't understand, and if I didn't make this point strongly enough in the book, it would be that when you care deeply about people and you support them and you support their needs and you basically elevate people, and by doing that, you can actually become more demanding. You can set higher goals and higher expectations because people have everything they need. Now it's like, let's go for it. I got everything I need. Let's go execute.
Yep.
When people don't get their needs met, then they're spending a lot of energy trying to figure out how to get them, and they're not productive the way you need them to be. So I think that's kind of the answer.
Yeah, and so I'll tell you. So we run in a little bit different circles. So we do lean, consulting, and so certainly it's what you described as a big piece of what we do. And in lean terms, we call that respect for people, and that's kind of for lack of a better term, and everybody please forgive me, but the soft skills, which I hate that term, but it's exactly what you're talking about, because people get scared when folks like me walk in, because one of the first questions I ask when I do workshops is like, have you ever heard the term lean before? And if not, what comes to mind? Invariably, people are like, well, trim the fat, do more with less, and blah, blah, blah. And people will very quickly get to the point of, this guy's going to get me fired. And it's a lot of work up front to help everybody understand. No, that is like that's not even on the list of things that I'm here to help with. It's all this other stuff. Yes, it's throughput and productivity and delivering value to customers and, both internal and external. But it's a lot of, when I find myself working on is a lot of stuff you're talking about, which is help me understand what I can do to help you make your job better. And, it's all, honestly, a lot of times it takes, I'm out on a shop floor with a guy who runs a mill and he's done the same thing for 30 years. And he's like, I hate this, anytime I need this tool or whatever, it's never where I need it, or somebody took it, I'm like, okay. So, and it's simple, this is simple stuff, but we'll set up a shadow board. He gets all his own tools and it's right there. And I had there's a story I tell. A guy grabbed me at a client of ours and he's like, hey, this is somebody we'd worked with for, I don't know, a year and a half or so. And he says, I just want you to know when you guys first showed up, I wasn't too sure about all this lean stuff. It kind of sounded too good to be true. He goes, but I can see now what you were talking about. And I want you to know, I've got 3 boys and I forget their ages, but the older 2 are already like through high school. He goes, but my youngest, he goes, I can actually help coach his football team now. And my other 2 played football, but I could never help coach because I was always at work, like 60, 70 hours a week, because we're always behind and, like we couldn't get enough done and, the whole thing, right? Customers are yelling at us and it was never good enough. He goes, so I never even asked my boss if I could take the time off because I knew the answer was going to be no. He goes, but because of all the stuff you guys have done, I can actually do that now. And that's something I'll never forget and my youngest will never forget. And it's like, if I could, and I tell that story fairly often, I'm like, because that's it. That's what that's what all of this is all about, right?
You have to have an audience, right?
Right.
So, in other words, people hear this word heart and they immediately dismiss it. So you don't get in front of them because they go, oh, well, that guy doesn't get business, right? That guy's never been in the real world talking like that. My speaking agent told me a few years ago, he goes, I've never had anybody generate more interest only to not get the event. And I was like, crestfallen. I'm like, why? And they think I'm going to come in and I'm going to sing Kumbaya. That's what he said, everybody now, and it just completely crazed. And so the conversation that you had, you got to the other side of it because you're talking about how people hear you coming in as a lean guy and they're like, immediately he's going to get me laid off. Right. But if you have a conversation long enough and then you go and you do your work, you actually make it life-changing for people. Like, hey, I can find my tools when I need them, or I can coach my kid. I have 1 kid left and I can go coach his football team and be with him when I want to and not have any regrets when those kids are out of the house, right? That's all really wonderful stuff. And I do really wonderful stuff myself when I'm on stage and I'm speaking to people and they get it and they hear the whole thing. Most times when I speak, people are crying by the end of it. And it's not because I'm telling them a sad story. It's because they realize, man, if I've been putting up with so much shit that I don't deserve as a human being, I shouldn't have to be working like this, like your guy. Shouldn't have been working 7 hours a week and forfeiting his entire life because customers weren't happy.
And it's and and we could sit here all day and trade stories, but you're right. I've worked for a bunch of companies that, quite frankly, and I'll say as a culture, they didn't support. Like I can't tell you the number of times I've been yelled at by some director or some VP for stupid, just stuff that wasn't even like my fault, but I just happened to be in front of them at the time. And I can remember there was this one time, it was this guy he's a big dude, West Point grad. He's very matter of fact and to the point. And I put this presentation together that he was really supposed to present, but we were kind of sort of doing it together. Anyways, I'm trying to explain it to him and he just wasn't getting this one slide. And he finally just blows up and he's like, well, you're coming upstairs to do this with me because I'm not presenting this shit and this is on you and blah, blah, blah. Oh, I'm like, what? And it's like, no kidding. It was 7:20 in the morning. So I walked out of that office with my boss and I'm like, what the hell just happened? And he's like, well, don't worry about it. And he kind of smoothed it all over. Now, flash forward, we have this meeting at 11. it went great, quite frankly. It was us and 2 other locations. The other 2 locations didn't even put a presentation together because they couldn't get the template thing to work. And we had, and so the guy, like, you know, the VP kind of cut it off at like 10 minutes. He's like, listen, you 2 other places, you got to get your stuff together. You know, you guys, you know, here in Connecticut, you're fine. So you 2 other, you know, call me later. And that was it. And that was like the whole end. I'm like, so why did I, you know, have to get yelled at and feel like garbage, and probably will again for the, you know, because I'm not going to forgive this guy, right? So the next time I see him, I'm going to have that psychological reactance. Like, why in a million years would you we're like same team, like we work for the same company. I'm trying to help, like, aren't we all, you know? And I never understood, and that's just one example. I could share 1,000 more. I hear it too when you know, out in industry. I don't get it. And like, to your point, maybe is it just because at, you know, in MBA programs and stuff, we just don't teach leading from the heart? We teach KPIs and metrics and
yeah, well, I mean, I think that's obvious. You know, in fact, you know, one of the things that I'm trying to do with my own podcast is to introduce people to people that are coming out of these major MBA programs, professors that are doing work that is completely apocryphal relative to the work that, you know, Wharton, you know, Harvard was established as a business school after Taylorism was introduced. Frederick Taylor, you know, basically the most dehumanizing, you know, person ever, right? We're going to turn people into robots. And so the business leaders were saying, hey, we want you to teach future managers how to do that Taylorism stuff. And so then you get into Wharton, and I had, you know, one of their emeritus professors on recently, and we talked about this. And I said, you realize that all you've been doing for all these years is teaching these guys how to manipulate an income statement and a balance sheet and fire people at the end of the quarter if they need to hit a number. And, you know, you didn't teach them anything about managing people, right? And he's like, no, you're right. You couldn't argue with me. And so I said, well, you know, how do you justify that? And he said, well, you know, we had like 2 or 3 of our graduates go to prison for insider trading. And we were like, wait a minute, we're going to have to do something different here. So it took them a really long time. But now what's happening is that you've got it. I'll set it up this way. When my book came out, I was convinced that what I was sharing was so stunning that CEOs would hear it and go, oh my God, like, there's no question he's right. We just have to take this now and change our culture. And it didn't happen. And it didn't happen because of the bureaucracy that these organizations had, and because these CEOs, were, even if they understood it intellectually, were going, well, I got successful doing it this way. And, you know, so why do we need to change? So you have all that kind of stuff going on. Well, what's going to change it is the bottom up. So students who are going to Wharton or going to Harvard or going to Stanford or going to Cal, they're coming in and they're like, hey, we need to know how to manage people. You just can't teach us being a quant, because that's not going to be, and a lot of these guys are very entrepreneurial. And so they're starting off with small teams of people, and they don't want to lose them and turn them over and have all that disruption. And so they're smart. So what's happening is that the students themselves or the employees themselves in organizations are like, I don't want to be managed this way, or I don't want to be taught this way. You're going to have to give me this information. So it's forced 2 things. It's forced professors to dig into what's a better way of managing people, or it's forced these organizations into bringing in professors who are already on that orientation. Like Adam Grant, for example, is a psychologist. You know, he's not an MBA business guy. He's a psychologist, but he comes in with an understanding that completely upends the way we've thought about managing people with give and take and being generous with people. And so you look at that and you say, well, why did he succeed there? Because he brought a whole different paradigm that people are desperate for. We're sick and tired of being managed in an oppressive, manipulative, non-humane way. And so what's finally happening is that these organizations, every school that I've mentioned, I think I've had at least one professor on from there who's doing groundbreaking work. Amy Edmondson with psychological safety at Harvard, for example. Sigal Barsade is, I'll announce here because I'm thinking this will probably come out after my podcast. I'm starting my 4th season on Friday. Sigal Barsade is a professor at Wharton who's been doing work on the emotional cultures. And it's complete validation for everything that I'm talking about. And basically what she's saying is that we don't spend any time thinking about the emotional culture of organizations. All it is about the intellectual culture. And that's not what moves the needle. And so I'm like sort of stunned that somebody like her exists in Wharton when you think about where they were 20 years ago, right? But they're ahead of the curve now. They're leading the way. And I'm trying to bring those people. So that's sort of my mission, is to bring those voices in so people can go, oh my God, like, wow. And wow, all these different places are thinking in a very different way. And I really truly believe what seeded all of that was students saying, you're gonna have to give me more. I already come in here with, 4 years of calculus anyway. So, that's not gonna move my needle. What's gonna move my needle is how do I inspire a team of people to do what I'm trying to get them to do.
Hi, everybody. If you're listening to this, then you know my podcast is relatively new. So I just want to take a sec and say thanks again for listening. I really do appreciate it. All the support and emails and texts that I've gotten really mean the world to me. So again, thank you. But I did want to take just a moment and tell you about another new podcast that's out that you might find interesting. It's from my friend Mark Graben, and it's called My Favorite Mistake. In it, he talks with business leaders and actually had a congressman on recently about their favorite mistake and why learning from mistakes makes all the difference. Now, if you're listening to this, I think that you could probably appreciate the need to be able to humbly admit mistakes and the importance of creating an environment where it's safe to talk about those, really so we can use them to improve. Search for My Favorite Mistake in your favorite podcast app, or go to myfavoritemistakepodcast.com and check it out. And that it's so, I don't know. I mean, we're sitting here in more than halfway through 2020, and it's like I'm glad I'm alive to see it move. Because so I'm a mechanical engineer, and I've spent my whole career on in manufacturing. So Frederick Winslow Taylor, Frank Gilbreth, Henry Ford. You like Industrial Revolution stuff. I can quote chapter and verse because for me and where I was educated, that was that's kind of what we were told. And right. That's, weird. I'm a numbers guy. Like I'm famous for saying, as engineers, we fight emotion with data. And I've gotten away from that because it's like, what? To me now, we talk a lot about KPIs and business metrics and how are we going to hit these things. And I'll admit for the longest time, I had it backwards. It's, you got to make the investment in the people first. And like you said, they'll run through a wall for you. So if I have a relationship that people trust me, they know I'm looking out for them. And I come in and I say, hey, Mark, listen, our on-time delivery is like not where it needs to be. And I need your help. Can you help me figure this out? If we have that relationship, I have no doubt that you're going to be like, yep. And let's grab these other few people and, versus what and it's frustrating, I guess, to me, because I still see that sometimes it's, they'll throw I've seen managers, in my previous careers where, they'll walk into a conference room and they'll have called this meeting and a bunch of us will be sitting there and they'll walk up to the whiteboard and they'll write some number on there that, and underline it, throw the marker down and say, and read us the riot act. Like, if you guys can't figure this out, I'll find people who can, and blah, blah. It's like, I'm not is this supposed to inspire me to make this better? Because I'm really
no. Here's the thing. So I'm going to have a little fun with you because if you're an engineer, you want to control your universe, right?
Yep.
You have to be attracted to wanting the trains to run on time, right? And figuring out how we make that happen. And God bless you for doing it, right? It's also an orientation that says people are messy, and I don't want to get caught up in that messiness. I actually just wrote it down, fight emotion with data. I mean, that is like the worst thing that you could do, you
I know.
know?
I know.
That ironically, right? That's the worst thing you could possibly do. I mean, there was a time where we thought that X-rays, cured acne
Yeah.
until we realized that, we were radiating people to death. And so you kind of go, well, it solved one problem, but it created a bigger one. And that's kind of where we're at with this, this idea of fighting emotions. So Frances Fry, who's a Harvard Business School professor, was on my podcast recently, and she's a quant. She's like, math and engineering and operations expertise. And then she does this TED Talk where she's had 4.5 million people watch her talk about trust and how do you establish and regain trust. And so, of course, my first question was, how do you go from being this like numbers guy to being this person who's talking about something that's really intimate, that's important, right? And so she said, well, as I started to go into organizations, she had that data mindset, right? I'm going to go in there and I'm going to get the trains running on time. But what she found was that people were often the reason the trains didn't run on time. So she's like, well, wait a minute. There's nothing that I can do until I solve that problem. So now I need to understand what it is. And I think that when you said, if you can figure out a way of supporting people, then they'll figure out how to get the trains to run on time. If you just come in there and write, trains come in on time, drop mic, and see what I'm talking about here, people? Get the trains running on time. What is that going to do to motivate anybody to do anything? And yet, that's what we think. So it's like, I'm going to talk louder, I'm going to talk faster, I'm going to be angrier, I'm going to create fear. This is how we've managed people for a really long time,
Right.
Rather than say, what's going on in your life? Why is this tell me, is this a challenge for you? What can I do to help you? I mean, these things sound stupid, but they're actually the most effective thing you can do if you want people to perform well.
Right. And it's amazing that it's like, and you're right, you say it out loud and it's like, how would anybody make these, but you're right, that it plays out time and time again. And it's like, and I've yet to be able to put my finger on it, and again, because part of what we do is, we call it going to the Gemba, which means go see. So I'll go out to the floor and I'll just talk with people. And I always tell, when I'm coaching a CEO or a business owner, I always say, you got to listen to the people doing the work because they know the best. This person who runs a lathe every day, 5-6 days a week for the last 20 years, they will know before anybody else what's going on with that machine, if it's acting right, not. It's just like our cars, right? You bring them into the dealer and you're like, it's making a funny noise. And the technician drives it and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Same thing. I'm like, but if we don't ask those questions and get that feedback from those people, this machine's going to go down. You're not going to be making parts, and your on-time delivery is going to go. You're like, the whole waterfall is going to happen. But it all starts with that person running that machine, or right, the accountant that's working on the computer, or the whomever doing whatever it is that we pay them to do every day. And it's like, and why we don't listen more.
Here's the reason we don't listen more. And I know I'm going to offend somebody listening to this, but we pick the wrong people for management a lot of the time. So if I pick somebody who's like, technically strong, knows the job, but doesn't have an orientation to, really care about and support other people, they're going to fail. Because what happens is you come in and you go, you really need to listen to your lathe operator because he's been doing this for 20 years and he's going to tell you stuff that you wouldn't know on your own. That is going to be a conflict with people that feel like, well, he's taking my power away, or that's going to threaten me and my superiority, and what does he know, and all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have somebody, and I put this in an article, and I was having a conversation with the head of research for Gallup, and I go, why don't we call managers coaches? And he was like, we should. And ever since, Gallup has been saying we need to. So it's very interesting. Came out of this conversation we had. But my experience is that the best managers are people who advocate. Like if you look at college basketball, for example, your wife went to UConn. They happen to have one of the greatest coaches ever, the women's basketball coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
look at what that guy has done there. He didn't do it by, we need to beat these guys by 10 points and then hammer the, drop the pen on the floor and walk out and tell this, he's coaching, finding out what's going on with these girls. What do they need to support? What can I teach you? What can I do? It's an orientation that says, I want to help you become the best that you can possibly become in the context of a team. And if I can do that for you, you're going to soar, you're going to thrive, and you're going to win. And that's what we should be doing in management. But we don't pick people with that orientation. We pick them because they were the best salesperson or the best, the best accountant or whatever. Yep. And we don't think that the jobs are different, but they're very different. And if we get beyond that, then you're going to have easier conversations. They're going to go, tell me more, Paul. What else can I do?
Right, right.
Because they're going to want to get better.
Right. And you're right. I see, the best engineers don't make, speaking from engineering, they don't necessarily make the best managers. And there's this, at least in some of the places I've worked, there's this assumption that if you know all of the processes, and again, maybe this is an engineering thing, if you know all the processes,
it's universal.
Yeah. Okay. That somehow you'll be able to lead all the people underneath you. And it's like, to your point though, it's like, okay, maybe that's a part of it. Like, so I got to help teach new folks how to use the systems or whatever. But that's like, it's such a tiny little part. Like there's this whole other, like to you, right? Everything we've talked about, it's how do you encourage people to do their best work? And I always like to say my job as a manager is to remove roadblocks so you guys can do your jobs. It's not that I'm the best engineer in the room. I mean, I've had some awesome teams. There's one team I'm thinking about. I was at a aerospace manufacturer. I would put my crew of manufacturing engineers up against anybody else. And I can't take all the credit because they're motivated. These are folks who chose their careers because that's what drives them. To me, it was my job to make it so they did what they wanted to do most of their day, not, all this other rigmarole of conference calls and meetings and reports and all this, all this kind of peripheral stuff that at the end of the day didn't really matter. So I tried to shave that stuff away as much as I could. And I don't know. I like to think that it had an effect. So, but anyways, I do like to take a break so I do have a little, what I call the wicked fun part, because I am a Mainer. So we put wicked, it's wicked hot.
That was a Boston thing.
Well, yeah, technically Maine used to be part of Massachusetts, so till we broke up. But
I didn't know that.
Yeah, wait. I don't even know how long ago, but way back. Although I think I'll offend all the Massachusetts folks, but any Mainer now is like, dude, you can't even say that. So, that's why I always feel conspicuous. If I'm up in Maine, I have Connecticut plates on my truck, and it's like, I always want to put a sign in my window. It's like, I was born here. I'm a local. Don't hassle me. Cool. But so I like to play this little game. I call the wicked fun part. And it's just kind of like a rapid fire. I just have a few kind of like fun questions for you. Are you in on that?
Absolutely.
All right. And so will you agree that I did not send these to you ahead of time?
No.
Okay. All right. So I just because I didn't want anyone to think it was like set up. Yeah. All right. First question. What do you think about when you're alone in your car?
I don't have much time in the car. So it's generally NPR. I listen to All Things Considered and This American Life and Marketplace. These are, but I usually I don't have a commute. When I'm not traveling, I work from home. I have a home studio. And so it's generally just driving to the gym or driving to Home Depot or something like that. So I don't have a whole lot of time. So that's probably not my thinking time. It's more of my listening, learning time.
Fair enough. I like Planet Money is one of my favorite.
Oh,
that and wait, don't tell me.
I had the founder of that on my podcast, actually.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
I did not. I don't know if I knew that. I'll have to check that one out. Yeah. What's your favorite song and why?
The answer is really clear to me. It's My Sweet Lord by George Harrison. And I think it's because it connects me. Since it's interesting you asked that question, because it connects me to when what happened after my father remarried is he decided to move to California and retire. And so he moved me away from my older brothers and sisters, the town I grew up in, all my friends, and moved me to a place that was just overwhelmingly different. And so My Sweet Lord is just this song that I associate with right before I moved away. So like sort of Nirvana, but it's an inspiring song for me. And it's not like a religious thing for me. It's an inspiring song. So I literally play that song every time right before I go on stage. It's the last thing I do. I
No
hear
kidding.
that song and then I walk out on stage.
That's cool. Neat.
That's how much
Thank
that
you for
song
sharing
means.
that.
Yeah.
That's cool. What is a loaded one? What inspires you?
The work I'm doing really inspires me. There have been days where I've been thinking that this was a colossal mistake because, I've taken a lot of punches in the stomach for saying lead from the heart. But I made a decision that I was going to stick with that and that I was going to own that language until the world came around. And there were many days where, I'm not kidding, I'm just being really honest, where I thought they're never going to come around. This is not happening. This is way too slow. The evidence is clear and yet people aren't responding. But I think COVID is really changing that. It's forcing people to think the way I've been thinking my whole life, right? You have to be caring about your people. You can't not be empathetic about people. If you are, you're really in the wrong job. So it's moving people into becoming more open to what I'm talking about. And so now the impact that I've always wanted to have is beginning to really, I can see it, I can feel it. And so that's inspiring to me.
Good. So keep going, Mark. If I can inspire you, keep going. Don't quit. And I'll give you an engineering example. And I'll butcher this story a little bit because I don't know this one by heart, but the doctor who figured out that most patients were dying from infection versus what actually, right? He presented he presented like some conference or something, and he was thinking same thing. He thought, I'm gonna present all this data, right, and everything I've learned, and it's gonna take everybody by storm, and we're gonna nip this thing in the bud. He was resoundingly like pushed off. Everyone's like, no, this is ridiculous. And it took years until that, and that's, again, we were talking before the podcast about healthcare and how, even to this day, how challenging it is. But when you think about something like that, here you've got a whole room full of doctors, nurses, and scientific thinkers presented with data, and they said, nope, don't want any of it. So
you know who Spencer Johnson is? He's the genius behind the 1 Minute Manager and Who Moved My Cheese.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And which I think is like in the top 10 best-selling books of all time. And I knew him. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he was familiar with my work. And one day he goes, you know why this is going to work, Mark? Because it's truth. And that was in the days where I was wondering whether I'd made a mistake and, should have just written the book and left it there, But what he was telling me was truth ultimately prevails. And we know that in our experience. And when he said it, it affected me so deeply that in those days where I was just like, is anybody ever going to really listen to this and understand what I'm talking about is real? When he said that to me, it was like, oh, I'm taking that with me every single day. Good. And now, of course, I think people are beginning to realize that is truth.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, COVID's forced us all to take a different look at a lot of different things and how we do stuff. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. What's one thing no one knows about you?
I'm kind of an open book. And we've talked about my upbringing. So one thing that I don't know that I really have anything that's like unusual that would make people go, oh, like my prison term. I don't have anything that I think I could add to that.
All right. So you're not learning to play the bagpipes or anything?
No, exactly.
All right. That was, I want to learn. Maybe when I retire, that's on my bucket list. When are you the happiest?
It's interesting you should ask that question because I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and at least in this COVID environment. So I was the guy that used to go to the gym every morning. It was a ritual, and I'd work out. And actually, when I was going, I'd bring my phone with me and I'd get on a bike and I'd start responding to tweets from the night before. I get a lot of responses from people all over the world. So when I'd wake up and I'd look at my phone, I'd have, hundreds of things to respond to. So I'd take an hour on the bike and then, I'm thinking I'm being really efficient. Well, when they closed the gyms, I was like, now what am I going to do? So I live close to the beach. So I literally at 5 o'clock every morning, including this morning, I go down and I walk the beach for an hour and a half. And it's dark. There's nobody on the beach. And I have one of the most beautiful beaches to myself. The only thing that I ever see most times is guys going out in a kayak to fish, or the guys with the metal detectors trying to find gold on the, on the beach. But for the most part, I'm there by myself and I don't have my phone with me. So I'm not doing any work. So what I found is this has become sacred time for me. It's like a whole meditation. It's just me in the dark, walking the beach, hearing the sounds. And by the time I get to work and start really doing work and responding to the tweets, I'm just in a totally different state of mind than I've ever been, not like going to the gym. So I don't even know if I'm going to go back to the gym when they reopen. That's how big of a change this has been for me.
Nice. And I think that's important. I mean, I call it quiet time. I think everybody needs to have more of that. So that's great. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I have a fantasy of going into Wells Fargo and recreating their culture because, we've seen nothing but the dark side of that organization for the past 4 or 5 years. And I came out of financial services and was very much aware that this was a company that was corrupt top to bottom for a really long time. The cross-selling accounts that customers weren't aware of, for one, and just a lot of really dark stuff going on there where ultimately employees paid the price, even though managers were forcing them to do these things in order to hit their numbers. And a CEO who, got really rich because of, these outrageous cross-sell ratios that were way outside of what other banks were doing. He looked like a hero and a genius, and it was all corrupt. And so I'd like to be the one that, because they're struggling, their stock is down like 50%. And I just think that would be like an awesome opportunity to go in there and say, you want to turn your company around? Here's how we do it.
Yeah.
You inspire your people. You take the fear out of your culture. You bring a little love into this place, and I could turn it around. So, honestly,
good. I hope they call you. I mean, that would be awesome to see.
I would be an incredible opportunity because they have 2 black eyes right now, and I don't know if they're going to recover from that.
Yeah, I don't know either, honestly. I mean, it was so bad, and all the stuff that they did, and even bullying employees. And I forget what there's some like certification or something that you have to have. It's like a C3B or something. I don't know, but it's like a black mark on a lot of people for some of the whistleblowers.
In their securities licenses, some of these guys were, they basically had a mark against them. So when you go into another organization, because compliance is so ironically important in most other organizations, the minute they see you've got this black market on your, on your record, they're like, well, we just assume not take any chances from, working with you. So these people can't work ever again in that industry.
Right. Cool. And like you said, it's for nothing they did.
Correct.
What profession would you not like to do?
Anything that's visual. I'm not I couldn't be an architect. I couldn't be, I can't read a map. Honestly, I'm the guy who can drive the same street for 20 years and see something that I've never seen before, or not even know where I am, in relationship to, if you have to go somewhere else and, I need to go there. How do you get there? It's just I'm very intuitive and I'm very not optical. Not visual at all.
That's my wife as well, by the way. She's a horrible, horrible navigator, but very intuitive. So, what quality do you admire most in others?
Generosity.
Nice. What's your biggest fear?
Um, I think probably that this is going to take too long, that I won't be around to see it, that it's 25 years out before we finally get this. That would be really disappointing to me. So that's why I'm grateful to COVID, because I think it's an accelerant. I don't think it's going to be hard for people to go back to the workplace and manage people in the old ways. And so I'm hoping that, like you were saying a minute ago, that's enough of a stimulus. But that's kind of what my big fear would be, is that I did all this and didn't get to see it. I want to parade in my lifetime, not
right.
My funeral.
And this one, I will admit, was added by my 15-year-old daughter. What is your favorite color?
I don't know why I can't think of the name of it. It's blue, but there's a special blue, and all of a sudden it's not coming to me. It's this color. I don't know why. I have this color right here, so I'll show you.
Okay.
It's this. I love this color. I think this is beautiful. So tell your daughter it's a cool question. But I don't often think about my favorite color, and I never really pinned it down. But I love that color. Can you name it?
It's hard to tell. It looked like aqua, maybe, or aquamarine.
It's not aqua. The funny thing is, it's the name of a crayon, of a crayon. I remember from a kid, and I just can't come up with it. So, but that's the color. So.
All right, fair enough. So we only have a couple minutes. There's a quote in your book that I thought summed everything up. And I think it dovetails with kind of what we talked about. So I want to read that and then get your final thoughts, if that's cool. So here's what you said. Here's what I've come to realize. Long after you can remember the actual work of the targets you met along the way, what's sustained in your memory is the effect you had on people's lives. By this one measure, above all others, you'll know the true impact you had as a leader. Can you add anything to that, or is that you think that pretty stands on its own?
I was thinking I have to think about how I present this, but I once worked for a boss, and this boss was a massive taker, and it was this kind of it was just this all the time. And it was somebody that went home early every day in relationship to what time everybody else did, but expected everybody else to stay there till 9 o'clock to get the work done. Just take. And so later on in this person's career, they solicited people that person would go out to other people that used to work for them and say, hey, I got a new role here. Would you like to come and work for me? And everybody had an excuse. Oh, I don't really want to do that kind of work right now. But really what they were saying was, I don't want to work for you again. And I think that's the legacy. I think I spelled it out, but I don't remember the goals I hit. I don't remember the numbers. I don't remember how many loans we had or how much investment sales. What matters to me, and what will matter to any leader, is to get a note from somebody saying, I was just thinking about you, and I can't tell you what a major impact you had on my life and how you helped me get where I got to. That's what it's all about. If you're going to be a leader, it's not going to be about getting the goals. Yeah, you're going to get rewarded for that. You're going to get acknowledgement and financial rewards. But in the big picture of life, the most satisfying piece of it, at least for me, is knowing that you made people's lives better. And you taught them something. You had them see something in themselves that they didn't see in themselves. They believed in themselves, that they were able to grow because you taught them something, or you gave them an opportunity to learn. You advocated for them. All of those kinds of things, you can do those in real time. And this is the thing. I think people think, well, if I send them to a class, they're not going to perform for 2 days, and I can't afford to lose the productivity. And they can't understand that by sending them to the class, you're going to amplify productivity, right? So all these gaps. So I just think it's if you just look at, if you fast forward and say, what do I want to be remembered for? And what do I want to feel about my own career and the impact that I had? You don't want it to be that no one wants to work for you again. man, if I could work for that guy again, I would do it in a minute. I think that's a much more satisfying life.
All right. I think that's a great place to stop. Mark, thank you again so much. If folks want to get in touch or follow you, what's the, and we'll link to the show notes to your, Twitter and LinkedIn. Is there any other places, that you want folks to hit you up?
No, I think, you can find me at markccrowley.com or leadfromtheheart.com, either one, and all roads lead to me. You can find me if you connect there, you'll find my podcast, my articles, my LinkedIn, my Twitter, all that. It's all there. So that's the easiest, simplest way to reach me. Even my book is there too. So
good. All right, good. So like I said, we'll definitely link and I hope everybody does. I mean, and like I said, I tried to help promote it, in all my workshops, because it's too important not to, quite frankly. So
well, I'm really honored by that and very, very grateful, because I really did learn a long time ago that this was going to be a handoff from one person to another. This was going to be somebody saying, you need to read this. This will change your view of leadership. That was the way this, it's not any tweet that I can send out, or, there's no marketing that I can do for this. Even this podcast, it's like that. It's still bottom line, you saying you should read this. That helps, make this thing happen, helps the movement happen. So thank you very much. And thanks for having me on. This has been a lot of fun.
Cool. All right. We'll talk to you later.
All right.
All right, Mark. Thank you.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. It's Paul. Before I let you go, I just want to say thanks for listening. I hope you found the podcast to be both entertaining and educational, as that's really what our goal is with it. If you did like it, please give us a review and a subscribe. The more folks who do this, the more the algorithms like us, so the more people will be able to find us. I also want to give special shout outs to Emma Critchley for her video and audio editing abilities, which quite frankly are way beyond mine, as well as Jeremy Grant and the team at the Timber Cross for their creative genius. I appreciate you all. I invite you to connect with us as well. We're all over social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, so we should be pretty easy to find. We share a lot of content that is much like what we talk about on the podcast, so it may be of interest to give us a follow. You can also find us online at newenglandlean.com. That's our website, and it outlines all the services we provide, things we do, customer testimonials, case studies, white papers, as well as being our main conduit for story sharing about all things that are lean, quality, and culture change focused. So check us out there as well. Finally, if you have any thoughts about the podcast, things you'd like us to discuss, things you'd like us to change, or if you want to be a guest or know somebody who would be, please email us at podcast@newenglandlean.com. We're always trying to improve and welcome any feedback. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, make it a wonderful week.